And so August 1916, the wasted month. From the 15th of July to the 14th of September saw struggles of awesome ferocity for individual objectives. The Germans fought for Delville Wood for another month, and the British failed to apply the lessons of the 14th and the 27th of July. The artillery was once again allowed to go back to splitting its fire at various targets rather than being concentrated. The artillery was mishandled. The infantry went back to attacking in penny packets. 100,000 men would be lost in August for 5.5 square miles, a slow, costly advance. 15th of September, you had the Battle of Flers-Cancelette. A major push was planned on a 10-mile front from Thiepval up to the join with the French army. Now, Haig had pinned his hopes for this major attack after so much wasted time on a new weapon, the tank. And it's going to be used for the first time. The objectives for this major attack were sensibly limited. The guns were reasonably concentrated, with one heavy gun for every 29 yards of front. A creeping barrage is going to be used, and used to good effect. And on this attack, the BEF won again a considerable victory, advancing 2,500 yards. At Flers, the 14th Division, assisted by the tanks, advanced 3,500 yards. The German lines were battered after this wasted month, but not quite broken. The German second line, however, had finally been cleared. And so the tank. Haig gets a lot of credit for the tank. He had asked for 150 to be available for the 1st of July, the first day of the Somme. If only there had been some. As it was, they weren't ready until the 15th of September, and then only 60, not the 150 that he'd asked, and so late and in small numbers. They prepared what they called tank lanes, areas of ground not bombarded by the artillery, so the ground wasn't churned up. And that's a mistake. The 14th Division took heavy casualties as the German machine guns had simply moved into the tank lanes so as not to be blown apart by the British artillery. The German defenders soon learnt where the British weren't bombarding. The 47th Division's commander, a man called Pulteney, made the rather inept decision to place High Wood, this key objective, as a tank lane. The infantry attacking High Wood therefore lacked artillery support, and the difficult ground of the churned up trees broke free out of 4 of the tanks in this area, and so those poor infantrymen were fighting without artillery and effectively without tank support either. High Wood was taken eventually, but only after a barrage by trench mortars supported the infantry. If only the cavalry had been able to hold on to High Wood, what a month of slaughter could have been spared. On the Western Front, though, it was becoming obvious that there was no substitute for an accurate, heavy barrage. Now, Lloyd George, the future British Prime Minister, has criticised Haig for using the tanks too early. As far as he was concerned, the tanks should have been held back until he had thousands of tanks to unleash upon the Germans. He wanted them to be kept a secret for this en masse assault. But Haig is desperate for anything that can relieve the suffering of his men. Also, these tanks are highly unreliable. They needed proper testing first. If used en masse, the roads of France would simply have been littered with broken down tanks, and so they had to be tested upon the Somme. Now, of the 60 tanks in France in September 1916, only 30 actually reach the front lines. Half of them don't even reach the front. And of these, only 21 actually see action. Another 9 of them break down before they can even see a German. The idea of a massed tank attack in 1916 is simply fantasy. Tank production was far too low. We'd be turning to our allies and saying, look, could you wait a year or two? They wouldn't be happy and would undoubtedly have left the war. The BEF had no means to fuel large numbers of tanks or to even repair tanks until 1917, and so in reality, using the tanks in small numbers across the line was the only sensible use of the tank in 1916. They are technologically unreliable machines available only in small numbers, and the use of them allows them to provide maximum support for the infantry. The tank is not yet a war-winning weapon, but Haig thinks that they might become so. And so despite the disappointments of the first use of the tank, despite the mechanical failures, he instantly orders another 1,000 tanks. He can see the potential. But that month of August being wasted will be a terrible blow to the British hopes of victory on the Somme. And so we get to the final battles, the battle for the German third line. On the 25th of September, there's the Battle of Morval. 8 British divisions attack a single German trench line. The British have learnt overwhelming assaults upon small positions. The German defences are now also much weaker than they had been on the 14th of September. The German army is taking horrible losses in this battle. There is a massive concentrated barrage and the German third line falls. On the 26th of September, Thiepval, that chateau attacked on the first day, finally falls to a carefully planned and well-executed assault by the 18th Division. Haig now believes the German army has finally cracked under the sustained assaults the British have launched upon them, and instead of continuing these overwhelming little attacks, plans for something much bigger, much bolder. He's going to try and break out of the Somme. He believes that the German army is now all but beaten on the Somme. And so it has to be said that he's not so far away from it, from being right. Already Germany has had to turn to child labour on the home front in their war factories, as they are now desperate for men to try and carry on fighting these sustained attacks. Remember, the German army is fighting at Verdun. They're fighting on the Somme. The Russian offensive, the Brusilov offensive, is the single most successful offensive launched by any army in the First World War, and is advancing hundreds of miles across the Eastern Front. The Italians are grinding themselves against the Austrian army in the Alps, and so he's not far wrong. And the Germans have already begun work on what they call the Siegfried or Hindenburg line, a second line of defence back from the Somme. They're already preparing to pull back from the Somme to try and spare themselves any more losses. And Germany, in a desperate shortage of men, has had to lower the minimum age of enlistment from 19 to 16 and to raise the maximum age of enlistment from 39 to 60. They're now taking every man from 16 to 60 for the front. And the troops that are left, they're not the elite, well-trained pre-war German army. German counterattacks are now slow and lack the verve and aggression of July. The German army is staggering under the blows that has been launched against it. But on the 7th of October, bad weather hinders the attack. The British infantry going towards the German lines are slowed in the mud, and the Royal Flying Corps can't spot for the artillery, and the attack fails. 5 more are launched in the mud, but all fail.